Follow a bagel, a donut, and a bundt cake across country as they. Remember that time back in high school when your one friend showed you Sincerely Me and you all sang along and danced to it, thinking that it was about a gay couple hiding the fact that they were together when really it was about a high schooler getting his not friend to fake emails between him and a dead guy to convince his family that they were friends? No? Just us? I'm Victoria.
I'm Carrie.
And I'm Juliet, and welcome to a Bagel and a Donut podcast.
Oh, calm yourself, honey.
As always, we are the Emo Trio, and if you want more from us or want to have a convo about our latest podcast episode, you can find us on Instagram as @SundayReads, Sunday as in the ice cream dish. That's our Bookstagram, where we also occasionally post about other media. This is episode 3 of our Holy Baked Good podcast, where we talk about media we have strong feelings about. In this episode, we'll be talking about everyone's favorite high school musical that isn't High School Musical, where an angsty teen gets away with mass manipulation because he was just so darn awkward and had a pretty singing voice. That's right, today we're talking about Dear Evan Hansen.
So we want to give a disclaimer that, like much of Twitter, this podcast episode is going to contain some criticism of Dear Evan Hansen. Obviously, these criticisms are our opinions, and they aren't the end-all, be-all of how we can talk about this musical. So if you do enjoy Dear Evan Hansen, that's great, and we're happy that you found a musical you love and connect to. Just because we aren't raving about something doesn't mean you can't, and we're open to hearing other people's thoughts on the musical. And further disclaimer, for those who don't know what Dear Evan Hansen is about, this episode will include discussions of suicide and anxiety and depression. If any of those are triggers for you, please proceed with caution, as these are big parts of the plot of Dear Evan Hansen.
Okay, y'all. So I know that we usually do a non-spoiler section at the beginning of our podcast. This is only episode 3, so it really is our pattern. But this episode, there's not really gonna be a non-spoiler section per se. The musical has been out basically since 2016, if not before. So we're going to be talking about all of the major plot points, if that matters to you. Sorry, maybe you can go watch a bootleg of a musical or read the plot summary on Wikipedia, and then come back here and listen to this podcast. But we're going to be talking about the plot a little. But I guess just a little background on Dear Evan Hansen. And we're going to both talk about the movie and the musical in this podcast. So we'll start with a little bit of background information on the stage musical. So Dear Evan Hansen started out as a coming-of-age Broadway musical. The music and lyrics were written by Benj Pasek and Justin Paul. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced people's names. I did not do research on how to pronounce them before this. Sorry. And the book was written by Stephen Levinson. The musical opened on Broadway in December of 2016 and starred Ben Platt as the titular character, Evan Hansen. The show received great praise upon its debut, and Platt in particular was singled out for his show-stopping performance. The show won 6 Tonys at the 2017 Tony Awards, including Best Actor in a Leading Role for a Musical, Best Featured Actress in a Musical, Best Score, Best Book of a Musical, Best Orchestrations, and Best Musical. But we have thoughts about this. Carrie has thoughts about this.
My thought is that I love The Great Comet. It was the best musical on Broadway that season, and it was robbed of many awards, but especially orchestrations. It is a joke that Dear Evan Hansen won orchestrations. I'm sorry.
Listen.
They didn't have accordions. They didn't have actors on stage playing instruments.
There were people on stage playing instruments in The Great Comet. Why didn't they win for orchestration?
We had Josh Groban on the accordion and the piano. We had ensemble members with violins. The whole thing. I'm still very bitter about it.
Listen.
As you should be, because we gave best orchestration to a very soft-core, sad guitar rock show that only had guitar.
Yeah,
it's like pop, I think.
Yeah, it's like soft pop, sad boy pop. Which, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But if we're talking about orchestrations here, I feel like there was a clear winner. But the fact of the matter is, in the 2017 Tonys, it was kind of clear that Dear Evan Hansen was going to win a bunch of stuff, because it was like that whole campaign where it's like, oh, this is how the teens be now. This is them struggling. This is how this connects with the youngins. this is what we need. And so it was obviously going to win a bunch of awards. And yeah, not that there's nothing wrong with wanting to connect with the teens, but should not have won orchestrations. That's fine. Let's continue. We'll talk about what the musical is about. Okay, so what is Dear Evan Hansen about? This is going to be a little bit of a biased plot synopsis, but just run with it. So the musical centers on awkward teenager Evan Hansen, who struggles with social anxiety, isolate him from the other teens in his school, and leave him longing for connection and understanding. When a letter he wrote for a therapy exercise falls into the wrong hands, a misunderstanding causes Evan to become entangled in the lives of the grieving Murphy family. And when I say he becomes entangled, what I mean is Evan lies to the Murphys about being best friends with their dead son, Connor, to exploit Connor's suicide for his own gain, forging secret emails to construct this fake relationship, get close to Connor's sister, and basically replace Connor as the Murphys' new son. It's really great, guys. If you're fans of Parasite, the movie, Bong Joon-ho's movie, you might like Dear Evan Hansen. I'm just saying. Similar vibes.
It's quite literally social Parasite.
It is. So I guess we can talk a little bit about, our background on Dear Evan Hansen. So we were all fans of the musical back in 2017 when we were in high school. Oh my gosh, guys, you're in high school. We were seniors in high school. And
Evan himself.
Do I look like Evan Hansen? Do I have forehead wrinkles?
Do I have a blue polo shirt and khaki pants?
Listen, I don't have a beautiful singing voice, which sucks. I will say, Juliet and me, I saw the Broadway production on Broadway with Ben Platt starring in it. So I did see the production. I did not just see a bootleg. All of us have seen the bootleg. Don't act like bootlegs don't exist. They're a real thing, and it's the only way a lot of people can afford to see these shows.
Quite literally, I don't understand why Broadway hasn't got on top of just recording performances and selling them as DVDs or whatever.
Hamilton proved it could be successful, so just do it.
Yeah, as a side note, I love bootlegs. I will admit this on the record. And I think we need them until every show gets a pro shot. And until the shows can start doing that, bootlegs are great. I'm a fan.
Yes.
Absolutely. We all support.
So, I guess we all really liked it back then, and now our thoughts on the show have definitely changed. But I got into it because Victoria sent me a video of Sincerely Me, and I had no idea what the plot of the show was about, and I totally thought it was about two gay boys in love having a secret relationship.
I don't know how I found it. I watch a lot of stuff on YouTube, and I just happened to run across a Sincerely Me thing, and I quite literally, for some reason, I can remember we were in Miss Molnar's class, and I just go, Juliet, check this song out.
Listen, it's a bop. I obviously, my thoughts on the musical have changed, but to this day, Sincerely Me is still a bop, even though it's a really dark song, technically. It's just a bop.
It's classic.
Yeah, it is a bop. See, I think I got into it, independently, but I do remember talking about it with at least Victoria. I know we talked about it in, English class. I have a clear memory of this. But I think the reason I was into it is, I was coming off my Hamilton phase, and I was, very into, getting into musical theater, and I remember when Dear Evan Hansen was, pre-Broadway, and, it was in DC, and there were, these great reviews and stuff, and so I would, look up the songs, and I listened to the soundtrack, the day it came out, and, I don't know, I think I just wanted to be, up on what was, happening on Broadway, and so I was like, oh, this new musical, and so I defaulted to liking it, and then I thought about it some more, and I'm like,
yeah. A lot of this podcast is going to be focused on criticizing the show, but I did want to acknowledge that, a lot of people do really like the show, and especially a lot of, teens or younger 20-somethings, and so I kind of wanted to talk about maybe why we had connected with it at the time, or why we thought people might connect with it now. We were obviously much younger. Maybe we were the target audience. We were high schoolers, so there was that. Um, and I think generally people can relate to feeling like they're an outsider looking in, waving through a window. And so I think in that sense, Evan was relatable. And I don't know how many of us would like go through the whole thing of faking emails and pretending to be this dead kid's friend, mostly because it involves a lot of effort, and I could not do that.
Nah, we were busy writing so many essays.
Oh yeah, we were in IB. For all the IB students out there, we know your pain. That's also why we like the musical. It was escapism.
We were watching the movie and I was like, I wonder if this is an IB school, because it would make sense. 'Cause all the students are sad.
Alana is an IB student.
She is.
She is!
Oh my gosh.
Cracked the code.
I mean, I don't know. It is, like, a lot of the hype was that it was a representation of mental illness, but I think a big issue we have with at least the Broadway show, I think the movie does actually say what mental illness that Evan Hansen has, but I think in the Broadway show they never specify. And so, like, it's a representation, obviously, of anxiety, and a lot of people can relate to that, but they never really talk about how he's dealing with it. Like, we never see his therapist or anything. So I think it was relatable on that level, but I don't know how productive it actually is in, like, representing it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, because when I remember watching the bootleg and like my experience with Dear Evan Hansen, it's always a thing of just like you like it makes sense that like he has anxiety, possibly depression, so like whatever else. But when I was watching it, all I could think of was just like he's just a lonely kid, and for like whatever reason people don't want to be his friend. And I feel like the reason I found his character not relatable but like sympathetic at the time was because, not that I didn't have friends, but I was like so insecure when I was in high school. I always thought to myself, my friends are just pretending to be my friends and they actually like find me really annoying. So it's just like watching Evan be like alone genuinely, I was just like, yeah, understandable.
Victoria, I found you annoying, and I still find you annoying. The tea is out. I understand that feeling too. Like, I still get like that now, and so I definitely think Evan has a lot of aspects about him that can be sympathetic. The problem, I think, comes with the plot and how Evan's character arc is handled, I think.
Oh, for sure.
But we can talk more about that later. Now, let's give a little background on that movie adaptation. So, for all of you people who have not been on Twitter lately, the Dear Evan Hansen movie recently came out. It was released on September 24th, 2021, which, fun fact, is Ben Platt's birthday, everyone. So, I mean, really, this movie is about him, is it not? And so it actually premiered before that at TIFF on September 9th, and it got lots of mixed reviews. The movie was directed by Stephen Chbosky, who is known for writing the book The Perks of Being a Wallflower and subsequently directing the book's movie adaptation. And I actually really like The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I really liked it when I was a teen, a freshman in high school, just like Charlie in the book. And so I really like the book and I really like the movie adaptation, and I'm kind of disappointed that Stephen Chbosky did not do better with this movie adaptation, but also I don't know if he's ever directed a musical, so there's that. The movie was produced by Mark Platt, who is Ben Platt's father, and Adam Siegel. And the film stars Ben Platt once again reprising his part in the titular role. And a little background, in case you haven't heard, if you've been living under a rock, there's been lots of backlash about Platt starring in the film because of his age. At 27, he's actually 28 now, but at the time, 27, he was definitely not a 17-year-old, and something that they did with the makeup and the hair made him look way older. He looks like he's like 35. So obviously not the best for a movie about teens. And some people also perceived him for being a little stuck up or entitled because of his claims that the movie would not be made without him. He claimed his critics didn't understand that the movie wouldn't have been made without him and that he was the only choice to play Evan because of his history in the role. And this was in response to backlash when people saw the trailer and saw how old he looked and were like, ooh, this is not good. And so some people kind of felt like that was the wrong thing to say. Like, obviously, sounds a little pretentious. The movie also stars Julianne Moore as Heidi Hansen, Evan's mom, Amy Adams as Cynthia Hansen, Connor's mom, Caitlin Dever as Zoe Murphy, which, side fact, y'all should watch Unbelievable on Netflix. It's so good. She's an amazing actress. Okay, goodbye. Colton Ryan as Connor Murphy, who I believe was an understudy in the original Broadway production, and he played Evan Hansen, Connor Murphy, and Jared, I think. Danny Punell as Larry, Connor and Zoe's stepfather, and a very attractive man. Can we?
Big fan.
Side note, this is unimportant, but can we talk about how the last 2 movies you've seen in the past 2 weeks both had DILFs in them? This is all I'm gonna say.
This is true.
The trend is rising.
And then Amandla Steinberg as Alana Beck, and Nick Dodani as Jared. And I also really like Nick Dodani. Okay, so the movie has happened, and I think the writers were aware that there was some backlash surrounding the plot of the original Broadway musical, and so they obviously tried to make some changes, I think, when they went into making the movie. But they also didn't make other changes, hence see the Ben Platt point before. But there were some changes that they made. I don't know if we want to talk about those a little bit and what effect we think they had on the movie versus the Broadway musical.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just gonna say they got rid of some important songs. I'm really mad because they got rid of Anybody Got a Map, which is the opening song of the musical, and it's one of my favorites. And I like it because it's about the two moms, so Connor's mom and Evan's mom, and how they're just struggling to raise their teenage sons. And I'm like, wow, this is a great introduction, because I think the heart of the original musical was Evan's mom, and I don't think the movie accomplished that. They also got rid of Disappear and Good For You, which are both songs that don't really focus on Evan and give side characters more time to shine and also hold Evan accountable for some of his actions. And so I was disappointed that they got rid of those. But anyone else can talk on this.
Yeah, side note on them cutting Anybody Have a Map or whatever. Is it Anybody Have a Map or Anybody Got a Map?
Anybody Got a Map.
I don't remember.
I think.
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't listened to
We're
this
fake
in
fans.
years.
Wait, I remember Anybody Have a Map, because I listened to that not too long ago.
Oh, Anybody Got a Map.
Wait.
Anybody Got a Map.
Anybody?
I think they say it so fast that you don't really hear the pronunciation of a G.
Anybody ought to
Because it is very much just like...
I don't remember.
It's very much just like, anybody made a map.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Mrs. Dora, where's the
Anybody
map?
something map.
Also, okay, not to cut you off, Carrie, but I just wanted to quickly say the harmony of the two moms, that's why...
Oh, yeah.
It's so good.
Continue.
Yeah, so they cut that as the opening number, which I thought it was a great opening number because it really is kind of all about the moms, or it should be, but it's not. But they didn't replace it with anything new. Instead, they did Waving Through a Window as the opening number, which I thought did not really work because that is the first thing you see is Evan singing Waving Through a Window, but you don't see him like actually trying to interact with people, and so you kind of don't know what he's singing about until like the second half of the song where he goes to school, and then it's like, oh, this kind of makes sense, but there's no build up to it. It just is like the new opening number, and it wasn't written to be an opening number, so I didn't think it really worked.
No, it doesn't, and oh my lord, does it look so bad in the movie. The transition, like you said, from him just like alone in his room to he he's like at the school and everyone's just like walking and it looks like he's like in a Black Mirror episode where he's like forced to sing and like he can only break free if someone notices him.
Y'all, it looks like he's like in his own world. Everyone's just like, why is this weirdo singing? Oh my.
Also, if you watch the extras during that scene, they look extremely awkward. They look like they don't know where they're going and they're kind of like running into each other. It's very bad.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so disappointing. I will say, they did make an effort to like try and give Alana a bigger role from the stage musicals, so they wrote a new song for Alana, and I think Amandla was involved. Yeah. I think they helped write the song.
I think that's correct. But I don't know. I don't know how you guys feel. I was not a fan of the song.
I did not think it was that great. Yeah.
Like, I couldn't even tell you how it goes now.
So it's called...
I haven't listened to it since.
I had to look up what it was called. It's called The Anonymous Ones, which I should have remembered because they say this a lot. It becomes like a tagline, I guess. And I didn't... Like, the song isn't bad, and I like Alana as a character, but I just think it was like super surface level and not at all that deep and kind of cheesy. But I'm also like, I don't like very cheesy things, so I don't know. Maybe I'm not the target audience with this.
I don't know. I think the song sounds fine because I do think she is a good singer. I liked her voice, especially because like it starts very like quiet and tepid in the beginning, which makes sense, but then like she kind of does get to show like a little bit more of her vocal talent like as the song like starts to build up, which I think is good and was kind of needed because the lyrics are so weak for this song that she does end up just repeating the full line, the anonymous ones, however it continues on, like for like whole stanzas. And yes, they're driving in the point that it's just like the sentence has a lot of meaning, so we're just going to keep saying it. However, when this is a tendency they use for a good chunk of the songs, it just... Yeah.
I also think it would be a decent, like, standalone pop song, but, like, a mark of good musical theater writing is that this song is there for a reason, and it's moving the plot forward, and it's, like, integrated into the plot. And I felt like this song was just kind of there, and it could have been, like, completely, like, non-diegetic. I don't know if I'm using that correctly. Because it's different in musicals and movies. It's like the opposite. I was going to say,
non-diegetic...
But this is a movie musical.
Yeah, I don't know. Non-diegetic is, like, sounds that don't exist in the world of a movie. I know that, so I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I think in musicals, it's non-diegetic if they're not aware that they're singing, which is what this movie tries to do, but, like, I don't know. It could have... My point is, it could have just been background music, and that would have been fine, because it isn't there for plot reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, not to knock Ben Platt, because he has a really great singing voice, but I was happy to have another song that wasn't just Evan singing, which was nice. But that's about all I can say about it.
Yeah, it kind of just feels like an album turned into a movie.
But really poorly.
Because... really poorly. Oh my lord. Anyway. So they made Jared gay.
Okay, listen. There was no... I like Jared, and you can make him gay. That's fine, whatever. But I feel like they didn't do anything with it. Like, they just, throw away the line, and I feel like if you're, like... It was just tokenism, and I feel like if you're gonna make any character gay, it should have been Connor, because I feel like the whole Sincerely Me just sounds like they have a fake secret gay relationship. Okay?
Yeah, it does, but they also make no homo jokes.
Yeah, that's true.
Which the joke was like somewhat cut off in a weird way in this movie. I don't know. But I feel like they made him gay because people thought that Evan and Connor were gay, and like there's like a whole ship, which that was a dark time. But the thing is, like, there's so much like homoerotic subtext with Connor and Evan, and apparently in the book there's like a novel adaptation where Connor is gay. So like they can't decide which character they wanted to make gay, and to begin with it was nobody. And maybe it should have stayed that way if they're just gonna like treat it like tokenism. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I would have been fine if it just stayed the way it was in the Broadway musical. I just feel like it's weird to make the change when it, like, Jared's not even, he's in the movie less than I think he's in the actual stage musical. At least it felt that way to me.
Oh, yeah.
And I could be wrong, but it felt that way to me. And so it just seems odd. I don't know, like, it doesn't seem like he had a character arc, so I don't know.
Yeah, no, Jared had no presence. Like, he's there, he's introduced, and it's just like, okay, like we said, there's nothing wrong with making Jared gay, but you can tell that the way they did it was very ham-fisted. So it's just like, hooked up with this guy at summer camp, which is fine, right? But
Good
it's
for
just
him.
like, what if, yeah, good for him. But what if instead of him, like, dropping what he did, we get to see him either, like, text his boyfriend or, like, hold hands with another guy and, do the show and don't tell? Because here's the thing. If they didn't make Jared gay, they still had, like, signs everywhere about, like, LGBT support, LGBT awareness, and I think that's good. I think it's great to see those posters in a high school, and it shows that it's just, like, this is something that we're thinking about, like, all the time, whatever. Again, him just, like, dropping it and then being introduced in the beginning, helping Evan with the emails, and then radio silence until basically graduation. So he's just not in, I would argue, 85 to 90% of the movie. Except for his parts in Sincerely Me.
I think this happens with a lot of side characters. Like Connor, even though Connor in the musical is mostly just a figment of Evan's mind, and so it's not the real Connor, it's just how Evan imagines him. Connor plays a much bigger role in the stage musical, and we actually see him more, whereas in the movie, he's just, like, in the beginning and Sincerely Me, and then there's, like, a video of him that Evan finds of Connor singing. And that's about it, which I was really sad because I feel like Connor is a much more interesting character, and I feel like the story should focus more on him, but we can talk about that later. But I feel like a lot of the side characters, like the moms, also did not get as much screen time. Alana...
Yeah.
I don't know. I've just felt like a lot of the side characters were done dirty.
Yeah.
Basically.
It's all about Evan all the time, and it was that way in the stage musical too, but it just really rubbed me the wrong way in the movie because it very much is like Ben Platt vanity project, and it's all about him.
Next change, this could be really brief, but Larry was made Connor and Zoe's stepfather, not biological father. It's a non-point. I guess it could be to, like, make Zoe and Evan have more of a connection because they both have, I don't know, missing biological fathers, but I feel like Larry's a good father to Zoe, so I don't know how much they can relate. I really have nothing to say except that he is an attractive man.
He's a very attractive man.
I want everyone to know we make Google Docs to organize these podcasts, and there's a whole picture of him, and I've kind of been staring at it because it looks like his pecs are trying to bust out of his shirt.
Yeah, like I said, we were distracted by Evan's age in the movie, but I was arguably more distracted by how much of a DILF Larry Murphy is. Like, he's the hottest guy in the room, and I would be distracted at family dinner. That's all.
With that in mind, I guess, like, another change that I've seen some people say, and I don't know how much you guys agree with this, but some people say that Zoe is given more agency in the movie, as in, for example, she kisses Evan first and initiates the relationship, as opposed to the stage musical where I think Evan might initiate these things more. And they don't get together after If I Could Tell Her, but instead during Only Us, which is a later song in the musical, in the movie musical. I don't know what you guys think about this. I do think she had a little bit more agency in that. Yeah, like she kissed him first and stuff, but he was still manipulating her. I don't know. I don't know. I'm conflicted.
Yeah. On the one hand, that does give her more agency, but on the other hand, it also, like, takes some of the blame off of Evan, which is a thing they do a lot in this movie. So by having her initiate the relationship, it's like they're making Evan seem like slightly less of a bad person. But in the musical, I always found those scenes very creepy when he's just kind of like openly pursuing Connor's sister after Connor's very tragic death. It's like, I don't know. And so they're giving her agency, but like, I don't know. It seems like it's almost in service of like taking some blame off Evan, which I don't love.
Listen.
Oh yeah, she's slightly better than musical Zoe, which is not a great feat.
No. And I don't know. I feel like if you were going to get rid of any song or rewrite any song, it should have been If I Could Tell Her. Because
Yeah.
that is legit Evan acting like telling Zoe that he loves her. But as though his words are Connor's words, as in her brother loved her. Which is just not what we want, right? Okay. And then I guess the biggest change I think that we can talk about concerns the ending, which is that in the musical, Evan comes clean to the Murphy family about lying, but the Murphy family chooses not to tell anyone about it, and Evan never tells anyone about it, so he kind of gets off with everyone else still believing that he was best friends with Connor. Whereas in the movie, Evan comes clean to the Murphy family and they decide not to tell anybody, but Evan takes it upon himself to post on his own Instagram that the whole thing was a lie, and yeah, he comes clean. So I guess they recognize that in the stage musical there is an issue where Evan didn't really face any consequences for his actions, and so they tried to fix that a little bit in the movie. I still don't think it worked that well, but that's mostly because we don't really see anything that happens after he like comes clean to everyone. Like, we don't get a lot of the consequences that he faces still. But we can talk about that more later, unless you guys want to talk about it now.
Now we can move on.
Okay. Woo, I don't know how to transition, y'all. So now we're gonna actually, now that we're done talking about like the differences between the stage musical and the movie, we're just gonna dive right in and talk about, you know, all of the things about the movie, all of our thoughts and opinions. And a lot of this is going to be a little bit critical or mean, but also it's our real opinions. So I'm sorry, you can disagree. Comment if you want to disagree.
We promised you at the very beginning of the show. We promised you we will make content about the things we love and the things we hate.
Here's the things we hate. Okay. Let's start. Okay, I think the biggest problem I have with this movie is that it is not a musical movie. It does not work as a musical. Like,
No.
no. Every time a character started singing, I was like, this feels so out of place. It was so awkward. I was shook, and it just felt so terrible. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. I'm gonna use my theater minor of to talk about
Pop
this.
off.
So, I don't know. I think part of the problem is that Stephen Levinson is like a playwright by trade. He had never written a book of a musical before, and he's also never written a screenplay. So like, he's new to both of those things. And I think what he set out to do was to write a realistic play. And like, Dear Evan Hansen really wants to be realism, but it's doomed to fail because it's a musical, and musicals are like inherently meta-theatrical, so you're always going to be reminded that you're watching a musical because people don't sing in real life. So when someone breaks out into song, it's like, oh man, I'm watching a musical right now. And so it was extremely awkward to watch characters start to sing mid-sentence and then everybody else just acts like it's totally normal. And I actually think it worked to like the opposite effect because it makes you even more aware that this is not normal and this is very weird to watch. Yeah, that's my rant.
I distinctly
No, agreed.
I distinctly remember so many moments during like musical numbers in the movie where I was just like, this feels so awkward. Like when Evan starts singing "Words Fail" as he's trying to apologize to the Murphy family. I was like, this is so bad. It feels like he's just singing because he doesn't know what to say, and so he's just awkwardly like, oh no.
He's like, I never meant to make it such a mess. And it's like, he's sort of singing, he's sort of talking, and then he starts like full-blown singing, and it's very intense, and everybody else is just like sitting around the table just watching.
Also, can we even call it choreography? Like the staging, I don't know what to call it. In this movie, like during the musical numbers, so often people are just singing and walking down the hallway. So often.
Oh yeah. No. Okay, I'm glad you brought that up because I think during Alana's song, I realized, and then it cuts to her walking down the hallway to her locker. I was just like, oh, okay. So they only had limited sets. They have the high school and then a couple of houses.
Okay, but listen, during Requiem, and I like the song Requiem. I actually think it's like a good job of like showing how different people handle grief. But when Connor's mom is just walking down the aisle at the grocery store, I busted out laughing. Because it had nothing to do... I was like, what is happening?
My bust out laughing moment was during For Forever, which is probably my favorite song from this show. Like, Evan gets up from the dinner table, it just, like, runs toward the window and starts singing, like, out the window. And I think there was similar blocking in the stage musical. Like, I think he gets up from the table and, like, sings out to the audience. But the problem is, like, we're not in a stage musical. There is no audience. He's singing through a window. It doesn't work for me. I don't know.
I mean, you can go, Victoria.
I tried so hard to remember the things I laughed at because I know I laughed at something really hard, but I can't remember.
Well, this is back
we
to
can
the
guess.
This is back to the grocery aisle thing. I distinctly remember making eye contact with you, Victoria, when it turned out.
Yes, okay, yes, because we love that a mother's place is only the grocery store. And it's really funny too because they make it a huge point that the Murphy family is rich. They are wealthy. So it's just like, this girl is not going to go grocery shopping. One, she's going to order it to be delivered to her house while she goes to, like, the mall or, like, a shopping outlet. Like, the grocery store?
Yeah, no. Also, there are just so many moments that are awkward. Like, when Evan Naruto runs away from Zoe at the beginning of the movie.
Iconic.
What was that? Also, there's that moment. Carrie! When we thought that Evan was gonna kiss his mom after something small, they go in for a hug, and it looks like they're about to kiss. Like, it looks like their lips meet.
Yeah, I actually, like, screamed in the theater. Like, out loud. Because it doesn't help that Ben Platt looks, like, not that much younger than Julianne Moore. I don't know. Julianne Moore is beautiful and ageless. And yeah. Ben Platt looks like a 30-year-old man. And so it kind of makes sense that they would kiss, but then you're like, oh no, they're playing mother and son. Like, this should not be happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and like the funny thing is when he does do like the kiss to the cheek, it almost looks like she had to move him towards her cheek.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just think there are a lot of things like that were very awkward. And I'm not saying the movie had to have, like, big musical numbers, every single song where people are dancing everywhere or anything like that. But I definitely think it could have been choreographed or staged better. Like, I don't know how often we need to see Evan walking through a hallway confused while all these other people walk around him, which is just a high school hallway, guys. That's how it works. Or how often we have to see Evan running through the forest. Like, this is like the meadow scene in Shadow and Bone for anyone who has watched that TV show. Like, we don't need to keep seeing Evan running through the forest. We know we get it. We understand the symbolic meaning of it, okay? I will say the one musical number that I think actually worked, and I think it was because it was kind of campy and I liked it, was Sincerely Me. Specifically, the beginning of Sincerely Me, when Connor is, like, talking to the camera, and so it's almost like a theater because he's breaking the fourth wall. And so I just really like that part. I thought it was really fun that it feels like he's addressing us, like he's actually writing the letter to us. I thought that was great. I can't say that about any other musical number. And to be clear, like, Ben Platt has a beautiful voice, and a lot of the other actors, even though they might not be, like, trained Broadway singers, don't have terrible voices either. Though the music did sound a little weird in the movie, but I don't know anything about sound, so I can't speak to that.
Yeah, from what I know, it might sound weird because they sang live, and like there's like a sound mixing issue, especially in Sincerely Me, which I also agree was the only musical number that worked. Requiem came close to working. I couldn't do the cross dissolve.
And the super impositions.
Yeah, but like Sincerely Me comes so like it's so much better because it is campy and like accepts that it is a musical song and is not trying to be realistic. But there's also like a scene where they're at like a go-kart place and you can like hear the sound of the go-karts and they're also singing live over it and it just doesn't sound great. But yeah, I think we all agree Sincerely Me is a bop. It's also like a deeply dark song because it's basically Evan and Jared like plotting to exploit Connor's death for social gain, but like in a way that kind of bops. I can't lie.
It does kind of bop, and I think it adds to like the dark humor of the show because and it's something the show should have like dug deeper into, like just do a little more dark humor and stuff like that. But also, to add on to the Sincerely Me song, I think it's like one of the only songs okay, specifically the portion of the song where it's just Connor. I think that was shot okay for a standard movie musical. It was one of the better shots for this movie because you can see that it's like they're editing as they go. And then Connor's little dance is really cute. Literally, when Evan joins in is when it gets weird, but when it's just Connor, it's pretty good.
Yeah, that first like minute, beautiful, amazing. Why didn't we get more of Connor? Good question. I don't know.
This movie could have been 2.5 hours of Connor hitting the woe, and I would be satisfied.
I guess another thing, maybe related, I guess this doesn't relate to the musical, but something else that just irked me was that, like, the set design and the costuming just felt so generic. Specifically, the Murphy house looks like just like a generic model home, and I don't know why it bothered me so much. Like, I guess if you're going for realism, maybe you want things to look generic, but I feel like that's not how a house actually looks. That's just like, it's like a Hallmark movie. I don't know. It just bothered me. It's a nitpicky thing. I know. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's fair.
I do wonder, this is pure speculation, but like I know they filmed this during the pandemic, like height of the pandemic. I think it was like one of the first movies, like major movies to be produced. I think it was summer 2020, and like I wonder if that had any effect on like budget or like set constraints. I don't know. Just throwing it out there. But I agree, the house looked very generic.
That's true. We should be more charitable about those things. And I don't mind that they filmed it in limited locations. I more mind how they filmed it, which we can get into next, I guess, if you guys are okay with that. The editing.
Oh, for sure.
I just want to say I have a lot of issues with the editing of this film. And I'm sorry. But we are no longer in the 2000s. We are not students using iMovie to make some crappy project, okay, you guys? I expect more. And I know that the budget was probably limited, but listen, you don't need to use cross dissolves. You don't need to use superimposition. Like, during Requiem was almost really good, except for the grocery aisle scene and the superimpositions that they used at the end where they were just like translucent floating heads on the screen. And it just came really cheesy. It ruined a moment that should have been really powerful that I was really getting into. The editing is just very, very like amateur-ish. I also feel like they used a lot of like zoom-ins and zoom-outs, like slow zoom-ins on Evan's face during moments that are supposed to be emotional, like during For Forever, I think I remember it happening. And the whole time, all I could focus on was that it was slowly zooming in on his face, and it just felt so awkward. Like, I know that it's meant to create emotion, like we're meant to be getting like sucked into his fake story about how he was friends with Connor in this orchard or whatever. But it just felt so almost like, I don't want to say emotionally manipulative, but like I could tell what they were trying to do, and because I noticed it, it just made things so much worse. And then, just one more thing to top it off. At the end of You Will Be Found, that's what the song is called, right? Why can't I remember? At the end of Evan's powerful speech, when there's that montage where everyone is like posting about it online, they're like, wow, Evan really helps me. And then at the end of the song, we see all these posts and they zoom out and become a mosaic of Connor's face. And I died laughing. It's so bad. And it's not only bad because it's super cheesy, but it's bad because it totally misses the mark. Like, that's not the real Connor. No one knows the real Connor. This is Connor's image being exploited by Evan for his own gain, but it's being turned into this emotionally empowering moment. Like, no.
Yeah. I think it comes close to, like, hitting the mark, but the problem with this show for me has always been that, like, You Will Be Found especially is, like, maybe the most popular song to come out of this show, except possibly Waving Through a Window, but You Will Be Found is, like, it's just Evan lying, and yet it's become this, like, unironic, uplifting anthem that, like, people listen to out of the context of the show and take it as, like, an uplifting bop, which is not what it is. It is, I would call it emotional manipulation, because they want you to listen to that song and be like, wow, I feel found. But it's really just more of Evan's lies. So that's another rant, another issue I have.
Yeah.
I'm just mad because, like, obviously, like you said, the whole message of You Will Be Found is that you're not alone. You will be found when you're in your time of need or trouble, which is a really great message and, like, obviously something everyone wants to hear. But Connor was never found, and technically neither was Evan. When he fell from that tree, no one found him, and he wanted to, and, you know, it's nice to want to believe that someone would have found you. But it's weird that, like, Evan is using Connor's suicide in this moment for his own gain, and no one actually knows who the real Connor was, and so he wasn't actually found, and I don't know. Just seems like a disconnect, and didn't work out great for me. I don't know. Also, this is, like, unrelated to editing and direction, but another plot point that bothers me is that, like, you know that moment after Connor's suicide where they're, like, showing all these people who pretending to have known Connor, like, oh yeah, we were friends and I'm so sad that he, like, passed away or whatever. And, like, it's like people are exploiting his death for their own gain, and Evan's like, obviously, with Evan, we should believe that that's wrong, but it's not like Evan isn't doing the same thing. Anyway, That's it. The editing was bad, and I was not a fan.
Oh, one more direction thing. Okay, so I feel like this movie is filled with stuff where it's just like, these techniques can be used really effectively in movies, but for some reason this team thought that they understood them when they didn't. Example, we keep flashing back to when Evan was running through the park and him falling off the tree, which is something you don't see in the musical because they can't really show it, and it almost feels like more, I don't know, emotional, or just like, it just feels better that it's something that's alluded to rather than something you see. But in this movie, not only do you see it, but they will constantly flash back to it, trying to explain, like, waiting till you can see him climbing up the tree and then choosing to jump off. And it's just like, it's not powerful. The repetitiveness does not add anything. This is not poetic. You really thought you were doing something here, but you failed the assignment.
No, it did not work. I was like, I get it. Evan likes those trees. I get it. It was a really traumatic moment for him, and yes. But I don't need to keep seeing him run through the trees.
Exactly, and it's just like, it's really sad that it's just like, this is his lowest moment, and I can't treat it seriously because it feels like they didn't treat it seriously. It just wasn't communicated well.
I guess one other thing that I can mention that's not very important and is totally nitpicky, but we're going to mention it because we live in Maryland. And apparently this musical takes place in Maryland, of all places.
Imagine my shock and surprise.
Gosh. When I saw that Maryland flag, I was like, no.
The Maryland flag in the school and the
Desecrated.
Maryland license plates.
Oh my gosh. I was just gonna say this movie was going for realism, but Evan lives in Bethesda, Maryland, and he should not be able to afford to live in Bethesda in a house like that if he's really struggling, as they say he is. That is all. End Maryland rant. I guess, like, we can talk about the biggest issue that people generally cite with this film, which is the casting of Ben Platt and why you should be afraid of middle-aged men in your children's school hallways. Like, I don't know, you guys. Basically, like we said before, Ben Platt was cast because, which obviously is something that I think people usually complain about, like when musicals are adapted to be movies, a lot of the times they're like, they had a really great cast on Broadway, why didn't you just cast the same people for the movie? And a lot of the times, you know, I agree with that, like, but I think here it doesn't work because he definitely does not look like a teenager, and I think and it's not just because he doesn't look like a teenager, but because that negatively affects the plot of the movie, and because the actors around him, though they are also not teenagers, look like they could be teenagers, or at least a good bit younger than him, specifically Zoe, which just makes their whole relationship even creepier than it already is, which it's already very creepy. I don't know if you guys want to talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, something we've talked about also is, like, Evan obviously does some very terrible things in this movie, and one of the only possible excuses for everything he does is that he's too young to know any better. But when you watch the movie, that is a grown man doing these things, and so that excuse kind of goes out the window. And so it, to me, was just, like, even more uncomfortable to watch him do these things and essentially face no consequences.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue that a lot of people have. And, like, I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but, like, this is something that I honestly felt the whole time I was watching the movie. I don't know what they did with Ben Platt's hair, because I think he is not a bad-looking dude when he has his regular hair and is not wearing that makeup, whatever they did with him. But in the movie, the whole time, I could not stop thinking about how weird he looks. Like, he just looked like weirdly old, but also like a child, and it just didn't work. And the whole time I was so distracted by it, and it makes it so much harder to sympathize with him. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe next time, cast someone that looks like a teenager, or don't remake this into another movie though. Let's just leave it as it is.
We need to accept this as the failure that it... I really hope that we learn from Dear Evan Hansen, the movie, because there's a lot of things we can learn from this. One, don't do a vanity project. Two, stop live recording for movies. No one cares. I'm so angry that Les Mis started this trend, which was pretty okay for Les Mis to do, but then they continued to do it for Beauty and the Beast, and we know that they had to edit the Beauty and the Beast soundtrack a lot, which is why Emma Watson sounds really auto-tuned. I don't mind it, but, like, we wouldn't have to deal with it if they just went with their recordings. Like, it's a movie, you're supposed to do things in post, just use the recordings, please.
Yeah, I don't understand why there's such a big turn lately. I don't know if it's just lately, but, like, towards realism in, like, musical films. Like, I feel like it's fine, like, your subject matter can be taken seriously, even if the world feels a little bit campy, a little bit musical, a little bit out there. Like, a lot of musicals have really great stories, really great messages, hard-hitting, like, impacts on people, but there are people out here, like, dressed weirdly, or, like, doing weird dances, but you still feel the emotion. Like, I don't know why there's this turn to realism, like, we need to have people singing live in our movie musical, no recordings or anything like that. Or like, I don't know. I'm bitter about it.
I think there's like a failure to understand that as soon as you decide that you're going to adapt a stage musical for film, that it's no longer a stage musical, it is now a film, and the medium is different, and you don't have to sing live. You don't have to like keep the stage blocking like they did in For Forever, and it was weird, because it is a fundamentally different medium. I say as somebody who loves theater and like prefers theater to film on the low, like they're very different things. They're different things, okay? And we can't mix them. Like, I think Dear Evan Hansen tries to create a weird, like, hybrid theater film thing that just doesn't work.
No. And that's not to say that you can't use elements, like more theatrical elements in your movie. Like, I thought the breaking the fourth wall thing in Sincerely Me works pretty well. So you can do that. You just have to know when to change something when it doesn't work well in a movie. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. I also just want to add a quick side note. Whoever directed Les Mis and Cats, it's the same guy. I don't know his name. He needs to be kept as far away from movie musicals as we could keep him in the future, because he truly does not understand that the stage musical and the movie are two different things.
What's the worst musical, though? Cats or this?
I thought this was worse than Cats.
Me too. I feel like Cats is at least fun.
Yeah, I had fun at Cats. I mean, I had fun watching this too, but that was not the intention. I was supposed to be crying, but I was crying of laughter.
On that note, let's talk about, so I guess the movie, the musical, the whole thing is marketed as being about kids and mental illness and like mental health and how kids are dealing with it today and what the impact social media has on that, etc., etc. And so maybe I felt like we should talk about how we think the mental health messages in the movie and the musical were portrayed and perceived by us. Like, what did you think about the representation? Personally, I thought in the movie and in the musical, but especially in the movie, I feel like the messages feel very heavy-handed and surface level. Like, I don't think we ever really go in depth a lot. Like, I mentioned this at the opening, but we know that Evan is seeing a therapist because that's the whole reason he writes this letter to himself. But we never see Evan's therapist, and so there's never someone to be like, Evan, maybe you should not manipulate these people for your own gain. And I also feel like, I don't know, and I know this isn't the writer's intentions, this isn't like the director's intentions, any of the actors' intentions, but I feel like the excuse that is given for why Evan is even in the situation in the first place is obviously that he's very awkward. And I think sometimes his, like, social anxiety is used as an excuse, like, oh, he couldn't speak up in that moment when Connor's mom was like, oh, this letter was addressed to you, because he just felt so bad for her and he's not good at confronting people like that and stuff like that. And I understand that. But I feel like people are using his mental illness as an excuse for why he did all of these terrible things, lied, manipulated this family for his own gain, which is just a really terrible representation, I think, of people with anxiety, because there are plenty of people out there with anxiety who do not manipulate whole families like this. Like, they just go about their lives, like, not hurting other people in this way. And so, obviously that's not the intention, and that could be just me reading too much into it, but I feel like a lot of the reason that we're supposed to sympathize with Evan and understand why he does these things, even though I don't really understand it or agree with it, is because of that. And I don't think that's the best representation of anxiety or depression.
Yeah, I agree. And just as like an anecdotal side note, so I have inadvertently become a Dear Evan Hansen hate account on TikTok. And I see people comment, like fans of the show comment, like, oh, you're missing the point, you don't understand, he did it because he has anxiety. Like, they do use that as an excuse, like, to excuse everything he does. So I think you're spot on in identifying that as, like, an excuse for the things he does, and I also find that pretty offensive because I don't think mental illness should be used as an excuse. At least, like in this specific story, it just does not cut it as an excuse.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate because it's almost perpetuating this wrong lesson of like if you have a mental illness, like your actions are excusable. No, if you have a mental illness, one, people need to take more time to understand the way you react to things and understand things, and then based on how like you perceive the world and how the world affects you due to said illnesses, better understand you and better help you, but still hold you accountable because it's like everyone has to be held accountable.
Yeah, and I think along with that, it like also feeds into the really terrible stereotype or idea that people with mental illness like do terrible things or whatever because they just can't control themselves or something, which obviously is not the case. Like there are plenty of people who don't do things like this, and so I just think it's not the best representation. And I will say, kind of going along with that, another reason why I wasn't a big fan of Alana's song is specifically because of the conversation that happens right before she starts singing, which is like, Evan, she goes up to Evan in the dark on some bridge or something on the road. I forget where they are. It's in the dark. They're outside. And she knows Evan, but it's not like they're friends. They're more like, oh, I see you at school and occasionally we talk. And the first thing she says to him is something along the lines of like, what do you take? As in, like, what medication do you take for your mental illness? And I just feel like that's such a weird question to go up to someone and ask that you barely know. And I don't know, it just wasn't the best writing. It felt very, very heavy-handed. Like, I don't know. I understand that you're trying to portray the fact that, you know, Alana, who's a very successful student who you might not expect to have anxiety because she seems like she is really good at public speaking. She thrives off of like these social interactions. You might not think that she has that, and so it's showing that like all these people can be struggling with things and not know and feel very isolated and alone. And I understand that. But opening the conversation that way felt very out of touch. That's not how teenagers talk. I don't think that's how most people talk. Like, I didn't know what that was. I was not a fan.
Yeah, it felt like a response to criticism of the stage show where people were basically mad that they didn't like identify what the mental illness was, and it was like kind of vague mental illness representation. And so they're like, okay, we're going to tell you exactly what medications they're on, but it's like extremely clunky as dialogue and also a very personal question that I don't think mere strangers would be asking each other, especially not teenagers with social anxiety. So, I don't know. Didn't work for me either.
Yeah. And I think the only other thing I have in relation to this topic is that I think Dear Evan Hansen would be a more interesting story if it focused more on Connor. Because, I mean, obviously the inciting incident, I guess, is that Connor, like, commits suicide, but we never learn anything about him, really. We just get vague things from what his family says. We know that he doesn't really have a great relationship with his sister, that maybe he was a little bit emotionally abusive, or that he took advantage of her for money. We know that he liked singing and playing guitar, and that he didn't like baseball. I don't know. But I don't know. I just feel like if this is a movie about, you know, mental illness and mental health and coming to terms with how you can live with anxiety and depression, how you can connect with other people, how you can not feel so isolated, then maybe we should talk more about Connor, who did commit suicide and, you know, who wasn't ever really found and who did kind of get lost and was also isolated. But he kind of just becomes a plot device. I don't really like that. I wish that he had been featured more in the movie because he doesn't really make many appearances, like we said before. And so, I don't know. I don't know how you could rewrite it, like, with keeping Evan as the main character so that it features Connor more. But it's just something I like to see.
I know how you can rewrite it, and we're gonna segue into my MASH episode rant.
Go.
It's perfect segue. Okay, so we're watching the movie, and then for some reason I suddenly remember a MASH episode that has kind of a similar premise to the concept of Connor dies and no one knew him. So, in the 5th episode of the 11th season of MASH, this old show from the 70s about medical doctors in the Korean War, in an episode called Who Knew, the main character, Hawkeye Pierce, who is a good man and a doctor, but he's very much a flirt, and he sleeps around with a lot of the nurses, is tasked with giving a eulogy for Lieutenant Millie Carpenter, who he had just spent the night previously, like, they slept with each other. And so, knowing nothing about her, he goes all around camp to try and find anyone to, like, tell her anything about her, but no one knew her. And it's actually really sad. I rewatched the episode to talk about it in this segment, and it's really funny, because the episode starts, he walks in back to his tent at night, and he's talking about how he just had he had this good lay, and then the next morning they're all eating breakfast, and the commander comes in, and he's just like, she died, and everyone is just shocked, and he's just like, who wants to give the eulogy? And in this mess tent filled with people, no, everyone is silent, and it's so sad. But so he's getting frustrated, and eventually he goes to the priest character, Father Mulcahy, who gives him her diary, and that's when he finds out, like, everything about her. And this is a really good and compelling episode, because it's just like, not only did no one in the camp know her, but from the little interactions they had of her, like, they kind of thought that she was, like, really cold and distant, and that, like, you know, it wasn't, they, like, tried to be friends with her, but she just never wanted to get attached to them. And so it's just really fascinating, because he gives the eulogy, and he's just like, you have no idea how much of a caring person she actually was. And so the main point of this is that it's just, Dear Evan Hansen was just such a bad concept from the beginning. It's not a good, like, it's not great at acknowledging or being, like, an activist statement for mental health, because it's just like, Connor, who had suffered so much, like you said, Juliet, no one put in any effort to get to know him / like, thought more about him in after his death, and it's just like, ugh, it's so sad.
Yeah, like,
That's my rant.
I love your rant. I need to watch MASH, especially that episode. But yeah, it's like, this is a movie about how we should and should not, like, memorialize people after they die, and it's making the same mistake that Evan makes by completely shutting Connor out of its narrative, which sounds like MASH kind of does the opposite. So again, go watch MASH instead.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. And I think this kind of ties into, like, the endings. So we said that they tried to change the ending of the movie so that Evan comes clean to everyone, in an effort to try and make it feel like he faces consequences for his actions, and then it ends with him, like, trying to get to know Connor after the fact. So he's reading Connor's favorite books, and he's trying to reach out to people that maybe knew Connor, and finds this video of Connor singing at one of his support group things, and shares it with the parents, even though Connor never wanted his parents to see him sing, but whatever. And he shares it with, I think, also the Connor Project too. But basically, Evan is trying to make an effort to try and get to know Connor after the fact, after he did all of these terrible things. And I guess I wanted to know what you thought about the ending. Personally, like, I thought it felt short. I don't think we see Evan really face consequences. Like, it's definitely an improvement from the stage musical's ending. But I think it does a similar thing where, like, in the stage musical, we get, I think, is it Words Fail? We get Words Fail. And then it cuts to, like, the ending, which is the reprise of For Forever. And it's, like, Zoe and Evan in the orchard, and Zoe semi forgives him even though he did these terrible things. And so it's almost like everything he did is immediately forgiven. That's the stage musical. And the movie, I think it does a similar thing where Evan comes clean on Instagram, and then we get a very brief montage of Evan at school just sitting alone, but he seems like content to be sitting alone. Not that he wants to be, like he's accepted it. And people just like staring at him awkwardly or angrily from afar, but like we don't ever see anyone. Like, I'm pretty sure if someone did this in our high school and like people knew about it and it was this really big thing, not that I'm saying that this is a good thing, but I'm pretty sure they would get like definitely harassed or bullied, and that's not a good thing. Like, obviously don't do that to people. But like I feel like we don't see him face any real consequences at the end. He still meets Zoe in the orchard, and it's not like they're back together or anything, but she still semi like forgives him, and that's fine. But I feel like you should be able to acknowledge that people like Evan, they want to get better, they want to make up for mistakes that they've made in the past, but that doesn't mean that you have to forgive them. And I feel like if I were Zoe or anyone in the Murphy family, I would never want to see Evan again if he did something like that to me. Like, I would never want to have anything to do with him. I would ban him from that orchard. Like, I don't know. So, I appreciate that they tried to make him a better character and give him more of a redemption arc because he comes clean himself to everyone. But I don't think we actually see him face consequences for his actions that feel concrete. And I also don't think... I understand that he's trying to get to know Connor and that that's a good thing to try and remember who people were, even if it's after the fact. But I didn't really like that the movie ended with Evan singing Connor's song, because it just felt like it was Evan stealing another thing that used to be Connor's, or like trying to become him in another way. I don't know. And that could just be me reading too much into it or my own bias coming into it. I understand it's supposed to be a symbol of Evan connecting with Connor more, even though he never really knew Connor when Connor was alive. I understand it's supposed to be a moment of reflection and connection, but I just didn't feel that way.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I think for me, it's less about like what consequences he faces, and I know like a lot has been made of that, and that was like the thing they tried to change in the movie, but they still want you to feel sorry for him. Like, they still consider Evan to be a sympathetic character, and the problem for me is not like whether he faces consequences, but whether he is shown to be like a good and sympathetic person throughout or not, and he is. And I think he doesn't deserve that. I think he's not a good person, and they just need to make that clear. It's not so much about like what happens to him in the end. Like, they had this whole thing about him reading Connor's favorite books, including The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which I saw that. They're not sneaky. Which, like, to me, again, that also just felt like him taking something that used to be Connor's and, like, making it his own. And, like, just more of the same incredibly invasive behavior. And I'm like, you haven't shown me that he's learned from what he did, because he's still the same person. And you still want us to feel sorry for him, which I don't.
Also, I mean, I guess I understand it because, like, she's a good mom and she loves Evan, but I'm surprised that Heidi like forgives Evan so quickly after he basically said that he could get like the love and money he needed elsewhere, i.e. at the Murphy family, after his mom did everything for him. But okay, I get it though. He's like a teenager and teens do that, and she's his mom and she forgives him. But also, she doesn't like ground him for lying to the whole Murphy family or anything. I don't know.
Yeah, this is why we needed Good For You.
I don't know. I was just really sad. Like, we don't really understand. Like, I guess we kind of get why Jared and Alana are mad at Evan. It's because he's not really, like, taking on the responsibilities with the Connor project that he said he would. But we don't get a lot of that, and so it feels kind of out of place that they're so upset with him. Like, we don't get a lot of their perspective, and I thought that was missing too.
Yeah, it's like the movie almost feels disjointed because once he starts dating Zoe, it's just like he's a whole nother person. Like, this man who has like terrible social anxiety, like has trouble like looking people in the face when he's walking through the halls of like the high school, when the one thing is leaked, and he goes to a party to find Zoe, and he has like no problem with like all the people who are there, is able to just immediately ask someone like, where did Zoe go? And it's like, it's not that like, it's like I can believe that it's just like, yeah, he has like changed and has gained some confidence and stuff like that, but it doesn't all happen at once, and it definitely doesn't happen just because you started a relationship. Like, you still need to actively work on yourself. um yeah.
I understand that this would be outside the scope of the movie. Like, this is already kind of a long movie and you don't have a lot of time for this. But I think it also would have been interesting to learn more about how the Murphys grieved Connor after finding out that all of the things Evan told them were lies. Because they already didn't know a lot about Connor, and so they were using the information Evan gave them to kind of build this image of him in their mind, someone that they could grieve. And now finding out that that was all lies, it would have been just interesting to figure out the effect that had on them and learn more about that, because I feel like that would have been really difficult. Like, now how do you grieve this person that was a part of your family, but it turns out you didn't really know them, but you have this fake image of them in your mind. I don't know. It would have been interesting, but outside the scope of this.
Yeah, I especially
Yeah.
want to see the mom grieve him. Like, I don't know. So one thing they added, like an added layer to the story, is that because Larry's their stepfather, we find out that their actual father died when they were very young, and that Connor knew him and Zoe didn't. And like, so we know that the mom like lost her first husband and then also lost her son, and we just get nothing from her. Like, I want to see how she deals with that. And like, she's just this total side character. They cut one of her only songs and we don't see her again, like after Evan's confession. So that was disappointing.
Yeah, everyone is unfortunately made to be props in Evan's world.
Speaking of, Carrie, did you want to talk about Alana at all?
I can talk about a lot. Yeah,
It can be short if you want.
yeah. I mean, I don't know how to make this short because this is like my biggest problem with Dear Evan Hansen as an institution.
Go as long as you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, go off.
Yeah, so the thing about Alana as a character is like she's basically the brains of the Connor Project operation. And it's slightly different in the movie. So in the musical, I think that Evan and Jared started and then she joins. I could be wrong. But in the movie, it's definitely like all her idea, which seems like a way to give her more agency, but again is used to take blame off of Evan later on because he literally says the words, "It was all her idea," I believe, and I don't know, she just gets like basically totally exploited by Evan and Jared. I keep wanting to say Connor. They have very basic names. And they like rope her into this project and essentially con her and use her for her intelligence because she is smarter than them and has the skills to create this project. Although I think in the movie Jared like makes the website. I don't remember. We only watched it a week ago. But my point is like, so we have Alana. In the musical she gets very little character development, and she also is like being conned by these two guys. And to circle back to the conversation about tokenism, Alana is the only character consistently played by an actor of color on stage, which was like an after-the-fact choice that they made to start casting, because in the original workshops, she was played by white actresses, and everybody was white in the stage production, except Crystal and Lloyd, who plays Alana. And this is something that they've done for a very long time. Like, they have cast every production with like an all-white cast except Alana, and then if they do cast other actors of color, they're only swings or understudies. And so I have a problem with this because like the character, it reads like tokenism to me because she wasn't written that way, and like I believe that they claim the show is like supposed to be cast as race blind, which is a whole other can of worms we could also talk about. But like they don't do that in practice. In practice they cast Alana, and then if they're going to cast other actors of color, they're only swings or understudies, and it just mirrors the way that the character is treated in the show because she is also exploited by a couple of white dudes. So that's my biggest problem with Dear Evan Hansen. I have a TikTok where I talk about this more eloquently because I like wrote out what I was gonna say and I'm just kind of improving, but I don't know. I just could never get over that. Like even if this were a good musical, it would still have that problem, and it is like a huge glaring problem. Yeah. Rant over.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think it was something that I don't know if I noticed it more in the movie because obviously I saw the musical a very, very long time ago. Not that long, but it feels like a long time ago. And so I definitely noticed it in the movie where, like, there's a moment where Alana is like, she thinks that Evan is lying about it. And she point up asks him, like, straight, just like, were you guys really friends? Like, are you taking advantage of me? Did you make me lie to all these people thinking that I was telling the truth? And he still continues to lie to her. Like, he takes advantage of her. And I know that, like, Alana is the one that posts Connor's supposed suicide letter. It's just the letter that Evan wrote to himself. But Evan was the one that gave it to her in the first place to try to cover up the fact that he was lying when he was actually lying. And so, like, I understand that what Alana did was not right. Like, obviously, no one should do that, but she was in a hard place because Evan was exploiting her, and then he wasn't helping her with the project after she had started this thing. And so, I don't know. I just feel like a lot of blame was put on her for that when I think Evan should also be blamed for it. And I don't think Alana, at least in the stage show, I don't think she got nearly as much sympathy as Evan did. I think there were actually some people who really didn't like Alana. And, you know, I can see why. She's like, you know, I think her character is someone that can come across as, like, very type A, and maybe some people don't like that. But, like, I think she got maybe some hate that was unfair in the original stage musical, and so seeing that kind of carry over to the movie where she's still, in some ways, being blamed for things that Evan also had a hand in, I didn't really like that much. I don't think it was done well.
Yeah, the library scene was very uncomfortable to watch because it's like she's giving him the perfect opportunity to come clean and he still can't do it. And early on in the movie you can sort of excuse it because he has social anxiety and he's like put in a very difficult situation, like with the Murphys in like the principal's office scene, and then later the dinner scene where he kind of like can't get a word in. But in the library scene, like she confronts him and is waiting for his response. Like there's no reason he can't just tell the truth.
No, that was the moment when I was like, we can no longer sympathize with Evan Hansen.
Yeah, like that was incredibly deliberate on his end.
Okay, guys, so this has been our podcast on Dear Evan Hansen and all of our thoughts on it. And just before we leave, we would like to leave you with this beautiful reading of a fan fiction written by our very own Carrie Shade. Take a listen. Imagine, a kid at your school has just died of suicide. Instead of seeing this as the tragedy it is, you see it as a golden opportunity to land social clout and also a hot chick, the dead kid's sister. You're over at her house, trying to seduce her by role-playing as her late brother when you hear her hot mom, who is also Amy Adams, call you downstairs for dinner.
You take your seat at the table, your beady little eyes downcast as you fiddle with your napkin, a universal signal to the world that you suffer from hashtag depression and hashtag anxiety. Suddenly, from across the dinner roll and dry salad-laden expanse of the table, you hear a booming voice call your name. Evan Hansen. It rumbles. You heed the call, lifting your head to lock eyes with the single hottest Georgetown law graduate ever to step foot in Bethesda, Maryland. All thoughts of the suicide victim's sister vanish at the sudden I can't read. Inexorable onslaught of pure lust you feel for his stepfather.
What came before doesn't count anymore. It doesn't matter. Words fail to describe the razor-sharp cut of his cheekbones, the sun-bright smattering of silver hair gleaming at his temples. There's nothing like the smile that tugs at the edges of his lips just then, sort of subtle and perfect and real. You wonder, does anybody have a map to help you navigate this feeling? Today is going to be a good day, and he's why.